Let me ask you something. The world never stops spinning. Somewhere, music is playing, laughter is echoing off the walls of a birthday party, and a child is blowing out candles, making a wish for a toy or a puppy or a snow day. That's what childhood is supposed to be. A space where time slows down and the heart is light, where dreams grow wild and innocence is untouched. But not everywhere. Not in Gaza, not for those children. There, childhood is something whispered about, something that lives in fragments, like a crayon stub buried in dust or a broken toy beside a fallen wall. A child in Gaza doesn't count stars at night. They count drones. They don't race their siblings to the playground. They race to the shelter. They don't dream of becoming astronauts or doctors or dancers. They dream of waking up tomorrow. That is, if they get the chance to fall asleep tonight. There's a kind of ache that comes from seeing a child hold on to their mother's scarf while the world behind them is burning. Kind of heartbreak that no words can fully carry. You see, the war doesn't just kill bodies, it murders moments. The giggles that never happen, the birthdays that will never come, the lullabies that will never be sung again. What crime did these children commit? What makes their blood cheaper than yours or mine? They're not soldiers, they're not rebels. They're not politicians drawing borders or drafting strategies. They're just children, fragile, curious, full of questions like, oh, why are the windows shaking? Or why did my sister stop breathing? Questions that should never be asked with tear-stained faces in the middle of the night. And yet, here we are. The world scrolls by. Eyes watch but do not see. Ears hear but do not listen. People send prayers like whispers tossed into a storm, hoping somehow they reach those small hands trembling beneath concrete and fire. But prayers alone don't stop missiles. Hope alone doesn't bring water to the thirsty or safety to the afraid. The cruelty of war is not just in its violence. It's in what it steals before it kills. A child who used to love drawing now flinches at the sound of a pen tapping. Another who used to sing now speaks only in whispers. They grow older but never grow up. Not really. Because childhood, that precious time meant to shape the soul gently, was shattered before it ever had a chance to bloom. And here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. We've grown numb. We've normalized the suffering. A school gets bombed, a hospital collapses, a family vanishes under rubble, and we glance, we nod, we move on. But that child, the one with eyes too big for their face and fear too heavy for their bones, they don't move on. They don't get to forget. That moment becomes them. We should be ashamed. Because when a child can no longer cry from fear, they simply freeze in it. That's not just a tragedy. That's a failure of humanity. Ours, mine, yours. So the next time we talk about a conflict, about a science, about a politics, remember who always loses, not the ones in suits, not the ones signing deals behind closed doors. It's the ones with scraped knees, with names written on backpacks they'll never carry again. Innocence isn't just lost in Gaza. It's buried, and the world is holding the shovel. There's something haunting about silence. Not the kind that calms you, not the kind found in early mornings or quiet forests. This is a different kind of silence. It's the kind that follows explosion. The kind that blankets a street once filled with voices, now choked in dust and smoke. The kind that screams not with sound, but with absence. In Gaza, silence has a voice, and it's louder than any siren. Imagine a child sitting alone in the ruins of what used to be their home. Their lips aren't moving, they're not crying, not anymore. I staged past hours ago. There's nothing left to cry out for, no one to come running, so they sit. Eyes wide, body still, caught in that eerie quiet that comes after too much noise. That's what silence sounds like in war. It's not peace, it's paralysis. Silence there is full of stories that won't be told, names that won't be spoken again. Mothers who no longer call out to their children. Fathers who've stopped humming lullabies. It's in the broken rhythm of daily life, when the call to prayer echoes but no footsteps follow, when bread goes uneaten, when a classroom's chairs remain empty long after the school bell should have rung. The noise is gone, but so are the lives that created it. And while bombs make headlines, it's the silence that haunts hearts. You see, violence is loud. It grabs your attention. But silence sinks deep. It lingers. It follows survivors in their dreams. It stains memories. And the worst part is, the world contributes to it. Every time we look away, every time we refuse to speak, every time we say it's complicated or it's not our place, we feed that silence. There are cries that were never heard, not because they were never made, but because no one was listening. A little boy who whispered his sister's name in the dark, hoping she'd answer. A mother who mouthed a prayer as the ceiling fell. A father who silently kissed his son's forehead, knowing he might not see him again. These are the moments no camera captures. They're not in reports. They're not retweeted, but they're real. And yet, in that silence, there is a kind of defiance too. Because even when the world turns its back, even when the screams fade, people still survive. Somehow, they survive. Children still draw, even if it's with charcoal on rubble. Mothers still tell stories, even if their audience is one child left. There's courage in that, in continuing to speak, even when no one is listening. But we who are safe, who have the privilege of volume, we don't have the right to be silent. Because silence in the face of suffering is not neutral. It's not passive. It's a choice that allows injustice to grow, to fester, to continue. When we stay silent, we are part of the problem. We become the echo of the very silence that's suffocating those children. So let's not romanticize silence. Let's not pretend it's peaceful. Not when it's born from fear, loss, and abandonment. The silence in Gaza is not the end of violence. It is its echo. It is the reminder that the world watched, heard, and said nothing. And for a child who spoke their last words to no one, that is the heaviest silence of all. The tragedy of Gaza isn't just written in blood and rubble. It's written in apathy, in the way the world shrugs, in the way leaders speak in carefully crafted statements, saying everything while meaning nothing, in the way people scroll past images of burned limbs and broken schools like they're just another headline. The bombs fall loudly, but the world's reaction is chillingly quiet. That is the wound that cuts the deepest, not just the violence itself, but the indifference to it. We live in a time where everything is visible. A child's last breath can be live streamed. A mother's grief can be captured in a photo circulated to millions in seconds. There is no more distance, no more excuse of not knowing. The world sees Gaza. It hears Gaza, but seeing is not the same as caring. Hearing is not the same as listening. And what we're watching is not ignorance, it's avoidance. It's in the way news channels report casualties like sports scores. 10 dead here, 20 there. Numbers always numbers. Numbers. But behind every number is a story, a name, a face, a family that will never be whole again. Still, the media speaks in terms that numb. They use language that flattens horror into diplomacy, a conflict, escalation, a collateral damage. As if the death of a child is a policy issue, not a moral one. As if human suffering can be reduced to political analysis and talking points. In the world, it debates, it argues. People post infographics and hashtags, only to move on once the algorithm gets bored. Leaders express concern, offer a thoughts, and urge restraint. Then shake hands with those dropping the bombs. Governments condemn violence with one breath and sign arms deals with the next. There's a game being played, and innocent lives are the pieces. But it's not a game for the people in Gaza. For them, it's survival day by day, breath by breath. The worst part is how routine it's become, how familiar the footage is. We've seen the same images recycled through the years. Ambulances speeding down dusty roads, fathers cradling lifeless children, mothers screaming toward the sky. We've seen them so often that we've become desensitized. It's not that we don't care enough to stop it. And what does that say about us? About a world that prides itself on progress and humanity, yet stands paralyzed in the face of cruelty? How advanced are we, really, if we can send rockets to Mars but can't find the will to protect a child in Gaza? How civilized are we if we value stability over justice and politics over people? The truth is, global indifference is not passive. It's violent. It enables. It excuses. It allows atrocities to continue under the pretense of neutrality. And every time we look away, every time we choose silence or nuance over truth, we become part of that violence. But indifference doesn't have to be permanent. Awareness can become action. Empathy can become pressure. Outrage can become change. We have the power, each of us, not to change everything, but to refuse to be complicit, to refuse to normalize the death of children, to refuse to let another generation grow up believing the world simply doesn't care. Because for the child pulling their baby sister out from beneath the rubble, the difference between silence and solidarity is life or death. And if the world continues to turn its back, history will not forget, and neither will they. What if a child's last words could be heard beyond the rubble? What if they echoed past the borders, through the screens, past the noise of politics and the silence of indifference, straight into our hearts? What would we do then? Would we listen? Would we look away? Or would we finally see ourselves in those words, not as heroes, not as saviors, but as witnesses who failed to act? Child's last words are not just sounds. They are mirrors. They reflect who we are, what we've allowed, what we've accepted. In those final breaths, truth is stripped bare. No filters, no narratives, no agendas, just raw humanity. A little boy whispering, "I tell my mom I'm sorry." A girl crying out, "I'm scared of the dark." A baby too young for words, reaching up for arms that will never hold him again. These are not just the end of lives. They are reflections of everything we refuse to face. You see, a child doesn't understand war. They don't understand sides or borders or treaties. They don't know what it means to be a target. All they know is that the sky turned red, the ground shook, and their world disappeared. Their fear isn't political, it's primal. And in their final moments, they don't call for justice or revenge. They call for love, for comfort, for someone to say it's going to be okay, even if it's a lie. And when we hear those words, if we dare to hear them, we can't help but be confronted. Because that child wasn't born hating. They weren't born angry. They were born the way all of us were, open-hearted, full of wonder, ready to give and receive love. Their last words reflect not their failure, but ours. The failure of grown-ups who promised to protect, to lead, to do better, and didn't. We like to tell ourselves we're good people, that we care, that we'd do the right thing if we had the chance. But a child's last words strip away that illusion. They ask, "Where were you?" Not rhetorically, literally. Where were you when I was crying out, when the walls came down? When I couldn't find my brother? And what do we say? I was busy. They didn't know. It wasn't my place. That's not good enough. It was never good enough. Those words, those final, trembling expressions of life fading are more than tragedy. They are testimony. They hold up a mirror to the world and ask the hardest questions, not about war, but about worth, about whose pain matters, about whose lives are considered grievable and whose are not. And when we look into that mirror, we must ask, would we have cared more if that child looked like ours? Spoke our language? Lived next door? If the answer is yes, then that's the wound we need to heal. That's the truth we need to face. Because compassion that only extends to the familiar isn't compassion. It's comfort. And comfort in the face of suffering is cowardice. But the mirror doesn't only show failure. It shows possibility. It shows that if we let those words break our hearts instead of harden them, maybe, just maybe, we'll start to change. Not through outrage alone, but through accountability, through presence, through refusing to look away the next time a siren wails, a child cries, a city falls. A child's last words can't change the past, but they can shape the future if we're brave enough to listen and brave enough to see ourselves in them. Not to be haunted, but to be awakened. Not to feel pity, but to feel urgency. Because when a child dies with questions on their lips, the answers don't vanish with them. They stay with us, in the silence, in the mirror, and in what we choose to do next. In the heart of Gaza, faith and hope live in the most unexpected places. They bloom in broken buildings and echo in the cracked voices of mothers who still tell bedtime stories by candlelight. They exist in the eyes of children who, despite everything, still ask about tomorrow. That's the miracle and the tragedy. Because even as bombs fall and homes collapse, children still believe. They still trust that someone somewhere will keep the promises made to them, that the world will care, that justice will come. But what happens when that faith is betrayed? What happens when hope becomes a burden, not a blessing? Faith is a fragile thing when the sky is burning. It's hard to pray with dust in your throat. It's hard to believe in a better future when your past is scattered across debris and graves. And yet somehow they still do. The people of Gaza still bow their heads. They still whisper words of peace into a world that answers with violence. They believe in a mercy greater than man's cruelty. They hold on to dignity in the face of destruction. That's not weakness. That's power. That's faith. Not the kind written in books or spoken from pulpits, but the kind that is lived day by day in the face of hell. Hope, too, is persistent. It shows up where it shouldn't. On the lips of a boy playing soccer with a crushed can, in the giggle of a girl braiding her sister's hair in the corner of a shelter. It lives in the little gestures, the saved piece of bread, the drawing tape to a crumbling wall, the lullaby hummed through tears. These are not small things. These are rebellions, acts of defiance against a world that expects despair. These children don't just dream, they believe in their dreams. They speak about growing up, about becoming doctors, teachers, builders of a world better than the one they inherited. And we let them believe. We nod, we smile, we tell them you can be anything you want. But then we break that promise, not by accident, not by mistake, but by neglect, by choosing silence, by prioritizing politics over people and comfort over courage. Every missile that falls, every aid truck that's turned away, every lie told in the name of peace is a broken promise, one that echoes in the ears of the very children we told to hope. What does it do to a child to grow up surrounded by betrayal? To hear words like a freedom and a justice and watch them twist into ash, to see the world rush to defend some lives and dismiss others as collateral damage. It teaches them that promises are just noise, that the world speaks of humanity but practices hierarchy, that their suffering is negotiable. And yet, here's the unbearable truth. Even then, they still believe. They still reach for the light, because that's what children do. They hold on. They love blindly. They trust again and again, even when the trust is broken. That's why this matters so deeply, because they deserve better than broken promises. They deserve truth. They deserve peace that isn't postponed. They deserve a world that doesn't just mourn them when they're gone, but protects them while they live. So the question becomes, what will we do with their faith, with their hope? Will we let it die, or will we finally rise to meet it? Will we honor the courage it takes to believe in a world that has only shown cruelty? Or will we continue to let these children speak into a void? The promises we make to children aren't optional, they're sacred. And when we break them, we don't just fail them, we lose a part of our own humanity. Because in the end, it's not their hope that needs saving, it's ours. When we speak of justice, of freedom, of human rights, we often speak from the mind, through data, policy, debate. We gather facts, argue points, weigh consequences. But the truth is, some things can't be argued. Some things can't be measured in statistics or summarized in bullet points. The cries of a child under rubble don't ask for a resolution. They ask for a response. Not from the head, but from the heart. Because this is not just a call to action. This is a call to feel. No, we built a world that responds faster to breaking news than to breaking lives. We analyze before we empathize. We ask questions like whose side are you on? Before we ask, who's hurting? But children don't care about sides. Grief doesn't carry a passport. Pain doesn't speak in political language. It speaks in silence, in shivers, in the hollow ache of an empty bed where a brother once slept. It speaks in the questions that don't have answers. Why did this happen? Where's my family? Will it happen again? We've grown too good at hardening ourselves. We scroll past suffering like it's scenery. We build mental walls to protect our comfort. But this moment, this tragedy, this ongoing devastation was never meant to be comfortable. It is meant to shake us, to undo us, to stir something deeper than opinion. Because if we can witness the death of innocence, the silencing of laughter, and still feel nothing, then the tragedy isn't just out there. It's in us. This isn't just about action. Action is important, don't get it wrong, but it cannot be. It cannot come from guilt or pressure or fear of judgment. It must come from the heart, from the kind of love that recognizes the humanity in every child, the dignity in every soul, from the kind of empathy that doesn't wait for permission to feel or for politics to align, but moves simply because it must. A child in Gaza doesn't care if you're left or right, if you're religious or secular, if you've studied the conflict or just heard of it yesterday. What they care about is whether anyone sees them, whether anyone cares, whether anyone is listening, not just to the noise, but to the silence in between. And if we can truly listen, not to speak, not to argue, but to understand, then maybe we'll stop looking for solutions only in governments and laws and start finding them in compassion, in humanity, in each other. And this is a call to the heart, to feel what others feel, to let their pain move you. Let their stories break you open, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary, because no change ever came from comfort, and no peace was ever built without love. And if we want a world where children no longer die before they dream, we must start by letting our hearts lead. Not just our hands, not just our words, our hearts.